Well, hey there team, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to my review of Return of the Obra Dinn. I suppose you could call this a 100% review, right? I've done all the achievements. In fact, that's why I'm kind of playing it. The short story would be, I played through this at launch. It's one of the most wonderful games I've ever played. It's made by Lucas Pope, the guy who did Papers, Please, which is probably much more famous and prolific, and yet, nothing against Papers, Please, I think this is infinitely better as a game. But I had like one more achievement left, so I just went back and scrubbed that up, and in the process of doing it, I fell in love with the game again and invested quite a few hours just getting back into the rhythm. So is it worth your time? Is it worth your money? It absolutely is worth it. However, as far as time, my Steam profile says 11 and a half hours. And like I said, that's sort of a playthrough and a half, 3/4. I've done overviews of it over the years. So you're not going to get 100 hours out of it or anything like that. But it is one of those games, you know, definitely top 100 of all time, easily. So what is it? Well, look, I'm going to use B-roll sparingly, and I'm going to dance around spoilers, because this is very much narrative heavy, but also it is a thriller, mystery, investigative game, so it kind of does blow its load once you know the story. So the less you know about that, the better, because that's where the value is. Dare I say, you could argue this is probably a walking sim done correctly and not disparagingly. Broad strokes, you're an East India trade company investigative person. It's like you're like an insurance analyst, you know, the thing that you always wanted to roleplay as. Trust me, it's fun. This ship, the Obra Dinn, has rocked up in port, and you've basically been given a directive. You've been given a mysterious box with like a book in it and a weird sort of compass clock thing. And within the book, it's essentially a blank slate with a crew manifest that you need to fill out and figure out what happened with the Obra Dinn. So you explore around the ship, and mechanically, you can essentially examine dead bodies and remains. They are remains, it's been a long time since the ship went through whatever it went through. But by interacting with the remains through this magic MacGuffin that you've got, you can see a snapshot of the final moments of that person. And so it puts you into this snapshot in time diorama sort of frozen moment that you can move around in for like 30 seconds. There'll be some audio and dialogue and some really good sound design of people gurgling and dying, and one particular dude dying as he shits himself. But you get like these really good audio cues that lead into the bang, the moment that kills them, and then that's when the scene kicks in and you go around investigating it, and from there it creates this sort of daisy chain of other people that might have died adjacent. You investigate their bodies. It is a little bit difficult to describe, and I only want to give enough to entice you, because again, the mystery of this is best kept secret. But ultimately, yes, you need to figure out who the person is and identify them by photos, or well, rather, I suppose, drawings by the ship's writer. So you have to tie the name to the photo to the dude in the scene. You have to figure out what killed them from a whole list of horrible things, and you have to find out who killed them, or, you know, what circumstances. Maybe they were crushed or something like that. And I believe there's the crew is totals to 60, something like that. So it keeps you very busy, and it jumps back and forth as a whole bunch of chapters, and the story, such as it is, unfolds. And it's just really good at the sort of carrot on the stick, pulling on the thread. Like I said, I just jumped back in to do this one difficult achievement to round it out and get it to 100% all these years later. And I just fell back down the rabbit hole. Brilliant game. But like I said, if you're strictly in it for dollar per hour, that sort of extreme stuff, that's not necessarily it. But if you are interested in playing one of the more innovative, original indie games out there that will leave a mark with you, you'll remember this for years, then I absolutely highly recommend it. I haven't even mentioned the art style, which is unique to say the least. Would it be? I guess it's 1-bit art, right? I never really thought about it too much, but it looks brilliant. And I guess you'd be really surprised at first blush, and you'd be forgiven actually for looking at it and maybe turning your nose up. I understand not everyone's into sort of avant-garde, indie, experimental graphics, but once you get into it, you realize it's actually beautiful. It's really good artistic design. It is obviously tall ships, navy sort of stuff as well, which is very near and dear to my heart, so I do have some biases. For those that have missed it, I'm ex-navy myself, so it's cool seeing all the different sort of ranks and the interactions. And again, I don't want to give away the story points, but there's passengers and there's dramatic interplay, and it all just plays out in a really punchy gameplay mechanic first. Even though the narrative is important and underpins it, the gameplay is actually king. And it's very unique. It's not like anything you probably have ever seen before. Also worth noting, surprisingly graphic. For frozen in time still still 3D environments that you walk around in, which is quite often what it is, it's pretty brutal. These dudes are dying. They're dying horribly. A cannon going off in a dude's face and his head's gone. You got to pick through his remains to identify him. So yeah, sort of a little bit of an unusual review. Out of time, I guess, but I was just going through my Steam library. I organised it by achievement completion, and this was quite near to the top. I flip-flop on the idea of 100%ing games. On the one hand, I think you got to be careful that you don't lose sight of the forest for the trees, in that if you're playing a game for achievements, are you actually playing a game, or are you engaging with an idiosyncratic, obsessive-compulsive adjacent sort of syndrome? I mean, at the end of the day, find your fun where you get it, but are you actually playing a game, or are you doing the equivalent of pulling a handle on a slot machine to feed your addiction? Food for thought. But on the other side of it, as I play around in this review space, and I am pretty disillusioned with a lot of reviewers, time and time again, they've been caught plagiarizing and fudging things. And if you put it to most people, most of us lay gamers, do you think these big indie houses are 100% completing these games when they review them? And I think a lot of people would press X to doubt. So there's something to be said about 100%ing a game for the sake of legitimacy. However, being that it's not really my first love, it's not really something I'm going to do for every single game. I already have my review format that I do, $5 for 1 hour. I'm pretty happy with that, and that seems to help people. If you can't make up your mind about a game by playing quite a few hours into it, then it's probably not a great game, or not for you, right? And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters for a review. So look, this is just a little bit of an aside. I suppose this is all in service of saying, if you would like to see me do games to 100%, as rare and few and far between as that might be, it's a bit of a longer project I can chip away at. I'm not against the idea of doing it for the sake of credentialed legitimacy, I suppose. Anyway, just some thoughts to close it out. This game is brilliant. It's wonderful. I think it's a totally reasonable price point at full price. But like I said, everyone's different, and it is a buyer's market. This is not Path of Exile, 10,000 hours of gameplay or anything like that. It's very much on the light end of how many hours you're going to get out of it, but it is definitely quality over quantity. So that's the main sort of negative, I suppose you could say. But looking at this game, you would have figured that out already, that it's going to be a shorter indie narrative type game. A lot of fun going back to it, a lot of good memories. I probably will do 100% games. Just keep an eye out for him. It's probably not going to be as often as something like Mortismal or whatever, who, if you don't know him, you should know him. I rate him very highly. He's a reviewer that's popped up recently, and while I don't necessarily have it in my DNA to 100% games like an absolute madman, he does, and I kind of respect the legitimacy that lends his reviews. Anyway, look, I don't want to waffle too much. Obra Dinn's great. Play it yourself. Team, we might just leave it there for the time being, and I will catch you guys on the next one.